It started with a tap on my shoulder. I was at the local VFW hall, a place I visited every now and then when the memories got too heavy, and I needed to be around people who understood. The air smelled like stale beer and cigarettes, and the TV in the corner buzzed with some football game I wasn't watching. "Hey," a voice said behind me, gravelly and close. "You're Navy, right?" I turned around, and there he was. A tall, wiry man with a thin face and eyes that didn't quite seem to match the rest of him. He was wearing an old Navy service uniform, one that hadn't been regulation for decades, and the ribbons on his chest looked wrong. They were all out of order, and some of them didn't belong on the same rack. I noticed a trident pin, too, slapped on like an afterthought. I forced a polite smile, nodding. "Yeah. I served." His face split into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Me too. SEAL Team 2, back in the day. Got a couple Purple Hearts, a Silver Star. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was, because guys who actually earned those medals didn't brag about them to strangers. Something in my gut twisted, but I didn't say anything. "Not yet." "Yet," I said casually. "What year were you with Team 2? He rattled off a timeline that didn't make sense. Something about Panama, but the dates didn't line up with when the SEALs were actually there. I nodded along, letting him talk, but the more he went on, the angrier I got. He wasn't just lying, he was weaving this elaborate story about missions he'd never been on and brothers he'd never known. Every word felt like a slap to the faces of the guys I'd served with, the ones who didn't come home. "So, what about you?" he asked, leaning in. "What was your MOS?" I stared at him, debating whether to call him out right there. But something stopped me. There was something off about him, something more than the lies. His grin was too wide, his laugh too sharp, his eyes darting around the room like he was watching for someone. "Bosun's mate," I said simply, keeping my voice calm. He clapped me on the shoulder, harder than necessary. "Good man. Hard work, bosuns. My team worked with your type all the time. Couldn't do the missions without you." I gritted my teeth. "Aha." He launched into another story, this one about some mission in the Middle East. I stopped listening halfway through. My eyes kept drifting to his uniform, to the medals and patches he hadn't earned. I thought about all the nights I'd spent out on the water, staring at the endless black ocean, wondering if we'd make it back. And here this guy was, turning it all into a damn costume. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. "Hey," I said, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Where'd you get that uniform?" His smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "It's mine. Earned it." "Right," I said, my voice cold. "So you know it's illegal to wear medals you didn't earn, right? Stolen valor." His grin disappeared entirely. For a moment, he just stared at me, and I thought he might back down. But then his face twisted into something ugly. "You think you're better than me?" he snarled, his voice dropping. "You think you're some kind of hero?" The room got quiet. The other vets at the bar were watching now, their conversations trailing off. "I don't think anything," I said evenly. "I know what I've done. And I know you weren't there." He took a step closer, and I could see the veins standing out on his neck. "You don't know what I've been through," he hissed. "You don't know anything about me." "I know you're lying," I said, my voice low but steady. For a moment, I thought he might swing at me. His fists clenched, his body tensed, and his eyes burned with something that looked almost feral. But then he did something I didn't expect. He laughed. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was high-pitched and shaky, like something was snapping inside him. "You think you're safe," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You think you're untouchable just because you're one of them?" I didn't know what he meant by one of them, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. Before I could respond, he turned and walked out of the hall, his boots echoing on the worn wood floor. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. That night, as I drove home, I noticed a car following me. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but every turn I made, the car was still there. When I pulled into my driveway, the car slowed down but didn't stop. I got out, watching as it disappeared down the street. My heart was pounding, but I told myself it was nothing. Just a weird coincidence. Then the notes started showing up. Slips of paper shoved under my door or stuck to my windshield. You're not a hero. You don't deserve it. I see you. I never saw who left them, but I knew it was him. One night, I heard footsteps outside my house. By the time I grabbed my gun and opened the door, there was no one there, just the faint smell of cigarette smoke lingering in the air. I didn't call the cops. What was I going to tell them? That some guy who pretended to be a Navy SEAL was stalking me? They wouldn't take it seriously. But I took it seriously. The last straw came when I found my old Navy uniform, the one I kept in a box in my closet, shredded and scattered across my lawn. The medals were gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window with my gun, waiting for him to show up again. He never did. Eventually, the notes stopped, and the car disappeared. But I never felt safe again. Every time I see someone in uniform now, I can't help but wonder if they've earned it, or if they're another shadow, waiting to remind me that some ghosts don't stay buried.